I am pleased to welcome Steve Taylor. He's the CTO of DeployHub, and he has a talk where it is titled, "It's Time to Harden the DevOps Pipeline with New Open Source Security Tooling." Steve has been helping customers for over 20 years.
We're on the wrong slide deck.
Oh no, the wrong slide deck. The tragedy. He is the architect at DeployHub, which is the first unified microservices catalog. He serves on the CDF Talk Board, the Continuous Delivery Foundation, and is a primary contributor to Ortelius and Persia open source CDF projects. So this is going to be a pretty amazing talk.
That's the right slide to start from.
And we are ready to go.
Maybe. Just thinking about it.
Meow.
Thank you. So, again, Steve Taylor from DeployHub. Today we're going to talk about the pipeline piece, and we're going to be taking this viewpoint of the pipeline, not necessarily from an open source developer creating a package and getting it out there and sharing it, but more from the consuming side of things. So one of the things that we've been seeing is new tools coming out that are going to be able to we're going to be able to put into our pipeline that are going to allow us to be able to provide better security, provide better insight of what we have going on with our software. This talk, we're going to span not only the OpenSSF tools, but we're going to look at stuff that's coming out of the CD Foundation, CNCF. There are plenty of other tools that are out there, but I'm just going to focus on those three main organizations under the Linux Foundation. As part of our pipeline that we're going to talk about, it is a simplified pipeline. We're not going to go into testing and deployment, post-deployment, observability. We're going to keep it to the main core part of actually getting code from the developer and building it and publishing it. So with that, some of the tools in the OpenSSF that we're going to kind of highlight here. The scorecard, the Salsa, it's more of a methodology than a tool, but we're going to show how it plays into the pipeline process. What we have going on with SigStore, specifically cosign for the signing pieces, SBOMs, the vulnerability database, and other tools like SIFT for vulnerability scanning and SBOMs at that level. So that's from the OpenSSF side. On the CD Foundation, we have tools that we're going to be talking about for our pipelines. Things like Jenkins, Tecton, Google Cloud Build, the Ortelius project, which is where we're going to be consuming a lot of this data, Persia, a build network, and JFrog's Frogbot. For vulnerability scanning at that level. CNCF, we got projects out there, like Artifact Hub, BuildX, that part of the build kit from the CNCF, Docker Hub, Quay, Trivy, those type of tools. So one thing that we've come across is you have to go get these tools from these different organizations. There's just not one organization that you can go to and say, give me everything, give me the solution. You have to put it together. More tools from the GitHub side and Microsoft side. CodeQL is built into GitHub, Dependabot as well. I put the GPG key, the code signing there, even though it is a GNU side of things, that's where it really comes from, but it does play a big role in the GitHub verification and signing process there for your code commits. Another one on the GitHub side is you're signed off by. It's actually just a little text flag that you pass in, but it is important. And then we have our actions, our GitHub actions and the Microsoft SBOM tool. So how do we put all this together? Like I said, we're going to take our simplified pipeline. I know this isn't the from beginning to end, but we're going to be talking about what's happening at the code and in the pre-build side. So when a developer makes a coding change, what do they do at that level? The next step is the build. We're actually going to create something. We're going to create an artifact. Well, I'm just going to describe things as artifacts in general. You know, that we can get technical and slice it down further later on into packages and stuff like that. And then there's going to be a step for post-build. Some of the things that we need to get out of it, out of the pipeline process, like an SBOM, some of the compile tools don't generate them by default at this point. They'll get there, but because of that, we actually have to have a post-build step to capture some of that information. Then finally, we're going to publish our artifact somewhere, and then we need to audit the whole process. So how are we doing throughout this whole pipeline process? So diving in, coding. So when a developer makes their commit, one of the things we want to turn on is code signing. So that's the GPG key. It's a flag to get your git commit. It goes hand in hand with the signature. So don't get confused. One is a lowercase s, and the other one is a capital S on your git commit command. You actually need to use both of them. You want to have your commits signed with your key, and then also you want to have your signature saying signed off by Steve Taylor, for example. And what that does is allows us to keep track of who's doing what out there and doing some verification at the commit level. Also, at the repository level, we want to scan the code itself. So we want to run through the code base, look for vulnerabilities there, and see what we have going on at the source code level. So this is all pre-build phases. Some of the things for the repository scanning, Dependabot. It's annoying. Believe me, we're in there every single day saying, approve this PR. It's annoying, but it's helpful because it helps you get your security score later on down the pipeline clear. You know, you get that A+ on Artifact Help, for example. CodeQL, the Frogbot, vulnerability scanning at the repo level. There's other ones out there, but these are just some highlights that I brought from the projects that I was talking about. Next phase, the build. So this is an interesting phase because, like I said, right now when we do builds, some of the tools are able to do SBOMs, some of them aren't. So take a standard C++ compiler. Does it create an SBOM for you? No. Something like AppCo, that's going to help create a package for you out of the chain guard world. That can generate you an SBOM because it's actually going to give you the SBOM of the source code to the package. Now, like I said, a lot of the tools, the compilers will evolve over the years here where it's going to be a default. I'm going to get an SBOM that's going to have source to my artifact at that point generated. Now, one of the things that we have to do if we're looking at like an image, like a Docker image, BuildX can do it. Some of the cosign tools can generate the SBOM as well as the signatures. So those are things that we need to look at the build phase are we able to get an SBOM at that level? Other things we want to do at the build phase is package verification. Persia was mentioned earlier. It's a build consensus network. So the idea behind it is I take the single piece of source code and I go build it on 10 different build nodes across 10 different companies. Okay, great. Now what happens? Well, we all have to come up with a consensus that we built all the same code, got the same result from the same code, and we didn't get anything interjected in the process. So that's part of the salsa model that we have to work through. And then a lot of people, I know it sounds ridiculous, but you need to have a build system. There are people that still type, like Python build, pip twine upload. Still happens. So we want to get to those automated systems, even with Golang. I can build Golang and then just throw my binary out there. We want to automate that stuff. Then on the Salsa side, we want to make sure that we're looking at what's happening during our build process, making sure that we're getting what we expect out of the source code repository. We want to make sure that after we do the build, that nothing's been interjected into that build process. So look at the Salsa framework there and follow the recommendations that they have there. Okay, so what do you do if your compiler doesn't create an SBOM for you? Well, there are tools out there that allow us to go ahead and, for example, take a Docker image, and Sift is one of them, for example. You can go out there and take this Docker image and just dump everything out of the image and create my SBOM. When we do that, some of the things that we're missing is the source code to package dependencies. We have package-to-package dependencies because we can look at the layers in the image and figure out, this is dependent upon this, and so on and so forth. But we are missing that source-to-package level SBOM. It's one of those things, it's not perfect. Like we were kind of talking earlier before lunch, we're getting there, but it is a good step in the direction because you actually do need that still. When we talk about SBOMs, we're going to have SBOMs at many layers. We're going to have the source to package SBOM. We're going to have package to package SBOMs. Eventually, we're going to have SBOMs about the compiler it was used to create your SBOM. So we're going to have all this information, all these dependencies come together at this in the SBOM phase. So if you're not generating them and the tool doesn't do it after the build before it gets published. So you have a good picture of at least something to start with. Next, we're going to put our artifact somewhere. Where are we going to put it? Are we headed off to Docker Hub, Artifact Hub, Quay? Any of the, there's Artifact Hub can do Helm charts, it can do jar files, war files, images. The OCI registries are starting to expand to be able to take any type of artifact and store them and distribute them for you now. So Ortelius has a new sub-project called Emporus, which is, we're working on an extension to the OCI registry to be able to allow you to store and search for any type of artifact. And that is not only including the images, but also SBOM information, metadata along those lines. And then once we publish stuff, and this is kind of like when from the earlier panel, is what do we do with it? So the Ortelius project is the evidence catalog. Go out and collect all this data from your build pipeline. And we'll kind of get into the list here in the next slide, but things that we want to know about are, signatures, providence, SHAs about, the git commit, all that gory detail that we need to be able to use down the road for AI and reproducibility. And then once we're able to gather all this information, we can cross-reference it with the CVE databases. So one of the things I like to do is to separate the SBOM from the CVEs. Now there's a big debate whether they should be put together or not. I like to do it separately because I can create my SBOM today, get the grade A score, and then somebody finds a vulnerability and I can just run up against that same SBOM and say, oh, do I have that vulnerability? Am I using that package? And I can do it real time and give me an up-to-date list of my CVEs in my application at that point. So finally, when we go through and do all of this, what do we end up with? Well, this is the list from the scorecard of everything that we need to check off. And some of the tools that we're putting in place in our pipeline are going to allow us to do a lot of that information. Gather that information. Now, there's things on this list, like I said, like the GitHub, the Git commit signing, that isn't there yet in the scorecard. But I recommend that you do it. You'll get the verified tag inside of GitHub as part of that. But overall, this list is going to get longer and longer and longer. Your checklist is just our starting point at this point of where we are. So that's one of the things that we want to look at is make sure that you keep on evolving your pipelines. I know people like, I got to go update my pipeline. Everybody thinks it's trivial. So I was doing a little bit of poking around for Jenkins. Okay, somebody guess how many Jenkins workflows are out there in the world today? 8. All right, a little higher. Anybody? 10,000? A little higher? Keep going? I heard 1 million. Keep going. Last time I checked for 2018, CloudBees was reporting 20 million Jenkins workflows out there. That's just Jenkins. That's not Tecton. That's not GitHub Actions. So when we talk about adding these things to our pipeline, it's a lot of work. So think about what you're doing. Pick up the low-hanging fruit. Like I said, the git commit signing, really cheap. It doesn't cost you anything. Just turn on the flags, go into GitHub, force it to be validated as part of your process. But slowly start adding the tools to your pipelines. Pick the ones that you understand and that you can implement. Code signing, using cosign may not be the tool right away for you because you haven't gotten your Docker build cleaned up yet. So take it at an incremental approach and keep on adding to your pipelines as you go. And if you have any questions, you can reach me at DeployHub or through the Ortelius project. And thank you very much. And I can take any quick questions. I think we may have like 2 minutes. All right, cool. Thank you.